Today, the trial of Boston bombing suspect Zohar Tsarnaev is getting underway more than a year after the attack that killed 3 and injured more than 200 others. Some 1,200 people have been summoned to potentially serve on the panel of 12 jurors and 6 alternates in a trial prosecutors say could last up to 4 months. And it comes as CNN has learned that Tsarnaev's attorneys, one of whom avoided the death penalty for both the Unabomber and Jared Loughner, the gunman who wounded Gabrielle Giffords, failed to reach a plea deal with the government. Here to discuss more, CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Paul Callan, and also with us, federal defense attorney for the city of Atlanta, Pate. Paul, I want to begin with you. We know prosecutors have surveillance video. They have messages that Tsarnaev reportedly wrote in the boat where he was found. They have evidence they seized from his apartment. How do you go about, as a defense attorney, helping your client's case with seemingly such strong evidence against him?
Well, I think this case is all about avoiding the death penalty. I don't think it's about contesting his actual guilt of the bombing. The evidence against him is overwhelming in this area, and it really would be foolish for defense attorneys, I think, to try to claim that he had nothing to do with the bombing. I think what they're doing, though, is during the guilt phase, you'll see them setting up sort of a sympathy case for the younger brother to try to argue to the jury later on he was dominated by his older brother and doesn't deserve the death penalty.
He was a pawn.
Yes, he was a pawn in this big scheme, and he was young and he was influenced, and he doesn't deserve to be put to death.
Paige, so much has been said about this trial happening in Boston. Why do you think the defense requests, their numerous requests time and again to move this trial elsewhere, have been denied?
Well, it seems to me that the judge in this case has been completely hostile to the argument that they can't get a fair jury in Boston. The judge refused to consider an expert affidavit that the defense put forward recently, and the judge is clearly committed that this trial will go forward. It will start today, and it will be in Boston. Now, the problem is the government has already claimed that the entire city of Boston is a victim in this case. And so even though you may get potential jurors in there and you may ask them, have you heard about the case? Have you made up your mind? Do you have any opinion? They are not always truthful. And I just don't understand why you would create the possibility for an appeal issue when you can simply move the trial just like they did with Timothy McVeigh.
Paul, I see you shaking your head.
Well, yeah, because on that question, I think it's interesting, and Paige makes some very legitimate points. I mean, this case is an open wound in Boston and particularly in Massachusetts. This is almost, Boston's World Trade case, the way it resonates throughout Boston and New England. However, a case, they can make a determination during the jury selection process that a jury can't be picked in Boston. So it's not over yet. If all of these hundreds and hundreds of jurors are questioned and many of them indicate they can't be fair, we still could see a change of venue in this case. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but from a legal standpoint, it has happened in other similar cases.
We now know that one of the attorneys representing Zohar Tsarnaev has represented the Unabomber, has represented Jared Loughner, was able to make plea deals for those clients to spare their lives from the death penalty. Not the case here, at least given the new developments this morning. The feds say no plea deal. What do you make of that? Can she be effective in her role?
She's been very effective in the past. This is a very sophisticated defense attorney, very well aware of how to negotiate in these cases and how to present these cases. And once again, sometimes we see deals made in the middle of trials. And the one big factor hanging over this case is it's taking place in Massachusetts. And while on the one hand that would seem prejudicial to the defendant, on the other hand, Massachusetts is a place where there's great opposition to the death penalty.
It's a very liberal city.
It's extremely liberal. And you're likely to get a jury, a death-qualified jury. People have to say they would be willing to impose the death penalty, but you're likely to get people who are uncomfortable with the death penalty. So in the end, maybe it's not such a bad place for them to be as defendants in Massachusetts.
Paige, I want to read you a quote from the Boston Globe. It was from an editorial article in 2013 saying the death penalty should not be pursued in part because, quote, in addition to the extra cost of capital prosecution, cases can exceed $10 million. Death penalty cases drag on for years. Such lengthy proceedings would ensure that the marathon bombing case lingers in the spotlight, compounding the sense of injury to victims. Years of proceedings would also give Tsarnaev what he and his brother apparently sought: publicity and notoriety. Paige, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree 100%, and there are other reasons not to do it here. As Paul mentioned, I mean, this is a fairly, at least on the death penalty, liberal community, and I think the recent polling suggests that 57% of folks in the Boston area think that he should get life without the possibility of parole, not the death penalty. So I think that's certainly a reason not to pursue it here. We should not be having this trial. It's going to be expensive. There are going to be countless appeals. And for somebody who's willing to commit terrorism, I don't think the death penalty is a deterrent. In some ways, it may incite this type of behavior. But at the end of the day, I still don't think they're going to get the death penalty in this case. So looking back on it, I think we'll see that it is a waste of time, and it was bad for the city to pursue it in this manner.
All right, Paige Pate and Paul Callan, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.